Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And where we also believe there is so much that we can do to stay in our own energy and to not absorb the energy or vibrations of those around us. That's what we're jumping into today. And I'm so excited because we have a guest that is literally laying it down, dropping the mic. You know what I mean. All right, so we are now in season 3. And in season 3, our focus is the reason we check into the idea of having more power than we think you do is ultimately to experience joy. Because in life, we really do have a state that we always dwell in, that we always live in. And so many people sign up for suffering unknowingly, right? And we believe that there is a different side that we can live in. We can live in this beautiful state and experience joy. That is all that season 3 is about, is the quest to help us check into that little by little so that we can bring happiness and joy and live in such an incredible state inside of us. Before we get started into today's episode, I want to remind you that we are having this momentary heart sync sale. And this is the last week that you can get it for the sale price of 25% off. Heart sync is a course where you can check into learning heart coherence. And as you learn heart coherence, you'll see that this is what helps us get into this beautiful state that I'm talking about. This state where we can create and experience joy in our life. It's one way or one avenue that we can tune ourselves, that we can help ourselves to truly check in and to do the work that we need to do to continue to elevate our vibration and keep our energy expanding. So go ahead and check in the show notes, and I'll leave you a link and a coupon code that you will be able to use to get that 25% off Heart Sync that will really help you check into joy. And remember, it's valid for only one more week. So go check that out. Last weekend, my family and I did something that was really great. There was a lot of things that we did. Let's just be honest. But one of the things that we did was we gave our trampoline an entire refresh. We have what I want to call a state-of-the-art trampoline. The reason why I call it that is because most of the time, if a trampoline had been, with your family for 7 years or so, you'd probably be like, okay, this thing is trash. We got to get rid of it. To be able to refresh it, we got to replace it completely. And the trampoline that we invested in is an alley-oop trampoline. And this alley-oop trampoline has lifetime warranty on the hardware parts of the trampoline. All you have to do is give your trampoline like a refresh every once in a while. So we've had our trampoline for about 7 years, and we just barely put on a new mat and all the new pads and the new netting and all of the business, and it feels brand new. And it still holds up. That's what's so impressive to me. And then the whole reason I chose the trampoline in the first place is because of the safety and the functionality of the trampoline. I love it so much. If you guys are looking for something to really give your backyard an uplift, a refresh, and create fun, right? Another entire room in your house, but outside your house, where your kids can enjoy themselves and have a complete blast. And, even the memories that we as adults have made with our kids on this trampoline in the past few years has just been pivotal. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link to alley-oop trampolines in the show notes for you so that you can check them out. All right, now let's get into today's episode. Our guest today is Brenda Winkle, and Brenda is actually a great friend of mine that I met through a business connection that we both have. We were on a retreat together. And after getting to know her and spending a couple of years really observing her brand and being an intimate part of different offerings that she's given, like breathwork and somatic healing. She does energy healing. Literally, this woman is a godsend for so many people. What she really does is she's an energy healer for high performers. She helps them elevate and amplify and expand their missions while guiding them to their most fulfilled yes. This woman is legit, for real. Her podcast, called the Yes Filled Life Podcast, is in the top 5% of all podcasts. She's been featured in so many magazines. She speaks on lots of stages. She's trained as a Reiki master, trauma-informed breathwork facilitator, somatic coach. She's trained in multiple energy healing modalities. I'm telling you, she knows her stuff. It is such a thrill for me to introduce you to her today, and you're starting to kind of get a little glimpse at why. So without further ado, let's jump in. Yay, Brenda. I'm so happy that you are here. You know that I treasure you, and to bring you here to add voice to the questions that I have for you today is very heart expansion for me. It's very exciting. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be here, Misha. It just means so much. I am so grateful for our connection. And I think about, it's been not even 2 years since we met, and all of the ways that we've shared time and shared space and shared heart. And so I'm really, really happy to be here.
Good. Let's jump in. I want to just start off by asking you. So I have a lot of clients who it seems like the conversation that we have a lot is around protecting ourselves from other people's energy.
Mhm.
So they're learning, they're doing a great job, elevating their own vibration and learning how to let go of the negativity that they typically don't even know they're holding. And we're working through a lot of that. And then all of a sudden, maybe like a family member walks in and just smears negativity all over the space that they share.
Mm.
And, you can walk them through all day long the element of letting go of the way that other people, need to be acting or so forth, that type of
Mhm.
thing. And
Mhm.
I think most of them have kind of mastered that, but they also really have a hard time coming into a space where they really just cannot allow their energy to just naturally absorb or be affected by somebody else and just what they're radiating. So I'm just wondering,
Mm.
what can you say to add voice to this circumstance, this situation of how do we maintain our own state while also just allowing other people to be in theirs?
Mm-hmm. Well, it comes down to radical responsibility. We're each totally and solely responsible for the energy that we're bringing into any space. So it's really important, probably not pleasant, but really important to remember that at the end of the day, we are making choices. We are choosing to let someone else ick on our wow,
Mm.
or to bring our energy down if we are allowing that choice. It really is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to start there so that we don't have any victim energy or make anybody else bad, because that's not going to help us. It's not productive.
You're only separating yourself from someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or you're trying to blame somebody for your
Mm-hmm.
circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And that also is not an energy that's going to be high vibration.
Yeah.
So understand that first we have radical responsibility. And then second, whoever holds the most solid vibration in the room is going to be the dominant vibration in the room. Now, this is not a competition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm going to try and overpower someone with my vibration. But if I am rock solid and steady in what I perceive to be a vibration that I feel good in, people are going to either vibrate their own way in a different way, but in like a Venn diagram kind of way. Maybe we'll touch up against each other, but I'm not going to overlap into them and they're not going to overlap into me. Or maybe they'll see that I feel better and maybe they'll want some of that.
Yeah.
And so I think just understanding this conceptually is important before we dive into strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we miss the concept and we try to implement the strategy, we can actually create division.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. That is a very beautiful and necessary point, because it does come down to sometimes where you think a lot of like I have a particular client in mind where I'm thinking like she'll say that she's so willing to do the work and he is really not willing at all to do anything. And so then there becomes all of this separation,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
that's that's a very like division, just like you said, that's such division. So we got to
Mm-hmm.
bring it back to being in a space where just because we're working on ourselves or we are doing the work to let go of the negativity and to be in a state where we're expanding, that it doesn't mean that other people, like you said, are bad or
Mm-hmm.
not doing what they should be doing. Like that is us placing ourselves into like that lower vibrational thought. And that's a really, really, really important point. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
love that.
Yeah. And one of the hardest things for me to wrap my brain around is that not all of us have the same path.
Yeah.
Some of us are supposed to like awaken into positivity and expansion and heart coherence. And for some of us, honestly, it's not our path.
Yeah.
And it all gets to be here and it's
Yeah.
all okay. And
Yeah.
when we remember that someone else's path might not be the same as mine, even if I'm in relationship with that person,
Yeah.
it adds a lot more compassion and it removes the judgment and the sting.
Yeah. So we were playing a game on Sunday, our family, and the game's called Blurt. And the idea is that each person, there's one reader each round, and they read a children's definition of a word. And then whoever says it fastest essentially gets to move that many points that were rolled on the die. And we kind of went over like, and this is so funny because you know those little memes that are like, my mom's a heart and a mind coach when, or
Mm-hmm,
I'm
mm-hmm.
married to a Latina when, or you've seen those? They're
Yeah.
hilarious. I told my boys, I'm like, we got to do that. That's so funny. But essentially, with this, so I broke it down. I was like, you guys, you know what we can learn about from this game? And they're like, oh, here we go. We're just playing a game, mom. Can we not just play a game? So I was like, it's so interesting because what we gave the responsibility to the reader to be the one who hears
Mm,
first.
mhm,
And they may not hear the first person that blurts it out. And if they hear a
mhm,
tie, they could give the points to both, or whatever. But the point
mhm.
was to understand that sometimes we're not ready to hear certain things in our life.
Totally.
Sometimes we just don't even have the capacity.
No, even if it's right in front of us, we will
Yeah.
not see it. We will not
Yeah.
hear it. It's the same thing as your missing car keys.
Yeah.
If you are convinced that your car keys are missing,
Yeah.
never to be found again, it doesn't matter how many times you go to your purse to try to find your car keys. You won't
Yeah.
find them.
Mm-hmm.
It's until you start to believe that, you know what? I really think I could find my car keys if I would take a breath and slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you open the purse and you're like, oh, there are my car
Yeah.
keys. We're
Mm-hmm.
not a vibrational match
Yeah.
until we're a vibrational match.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. Okay. So, should we talk about some strategy
Yeah.
inside of what do you actually do once you realize that it's not your responsibility to control other people and all this business? And
hmm
we're just talking about ourselves. What is the
Yeah.
strategy that we can do?
So I'm going to give you some shared language just so we know what we're talking about.
Okay.
I'm going to reference something called the central channel.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm talking about is basically the spinal column. I'm talking about the energy centers that align up and down our spine. Some people use the word chakras. Some people are not comfortable with that word at all. And I love the term central channel because we can all resonate that we have a lot of nerves in that part of the body. And
100%.
so no matter
Yeah.
what belief system you have, you can get behind the fact that there's a lot of nerves in
Mm-hmm.
that spinal column.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to call the central channel that spinal column because that channel is what connects us to source. That channel is what keeps us rooted on the ground, and it's where we can find all of our relationship goodness. So,
Beautifully said.
thank you. So, if we come into our own central channel, and it seems like, well, what do you mean come into it? I'm already there. Most of us are not.
Yeah.
Most of us like have our
Yeah.
energy out every which way, and
Uh,
we're like connected to people that we met at the store and
yeah.
connected to our family members and leaking over the mailman. So, if we just if we imagine just like taking your hands out in front of you and scooping up all the energy, crossing your fingers and pulling it back towards your heart, and just pull your energy back into your spinal column, you can probably feel a sensation of, oh, there's something happening there. It might feel like warmth. It might feel like tingles. It might feel like presence. It might feel like, oh, I can take a deep breath.
Hmm. Feels big to me.
Yeah,
I
it is
like it.
big. So this is where we're taking our energy back into our own bodies and we're
Mm.
not leaking those little fingers of energy around.
Oh, I
So
love
this is a really important starting place because when we're in our central channel, I can be aware of your emotions. I can be aware of how you're responding, but I don't feel it in my body.
Mm. That's great.
It's so powerful.
That is so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like you remember the zip up trick that you taught us? So
Hmm.
you've been on the podcast.
Yeah. I love
And
this podcast.
right. It's so good. So, and you taught us how to zip up, like we're zipping up a coat and going
Hmm.
up over our head and doing that 3 times. And I
Hmm.
remember there was a day that my husband was really, really struggling. And it's so interesting to try to walk through, like helping people, but also not like taking that inside of us. And
Hmm.
I remember he went to bed feeling kind of frustrated, which to me is like gosh, you're creating so much in your subconscious space when you're sleeping.
Hmm.
Like, figure it out. Let's breathe it, let it go. But sometimes when we're not used to that, or when things are really big, it doesn't always go that way. And I
Hmm.
can remember laying there and feeling this energy from him.
Yeah.
And it was soon after we had done that podcast and I did this zip trick. I was like, what? Wow.
It's profound.
Wow. And I think the more aware of how we feel inside we become,
Hmm.
do become aware that when someone else is in our space, even if they're not speaking to us or whatever, we can be feeling that. And so these tricks that you give us are so good. I love hearing you talk about, when you fall out, how to come back in. There was some wording that you used once that I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, central. You basically said to be rock solid in your central channel because you'll just zip right back into your central
Hmm.
channel when you
Yeah.
notice that you're out. And you have strategies on doing that. But essentially, for me, I also find that the more in alignment I get with my heart, the
Hmm.
more in alignment I get with my own energy, when I fall out, it's that coming back in by using like heart coherence meditation. And for you, I'm sure breath work and all of those things, because we overlap in those areas. And I love
Hmm.
using those strategies that you teach as well. But to me, it's like the more that we become like used to those methods, we can use those to come back in. But these little methods like the zip up and this, scooping your arms, like you're making your arms into a great big basket, interlocking those fingers and pulling them into your heart. Those are so, so great. That's like
Yeah.
instant fixes.
The instant fixes. And for
Yes.
so many people, especially if they're sensitive or highly sensitive, and highly sensitive, we can talk about what that term means in case it's new to people. But a lot of times we don't even know that we're taking on the energy of other people.
Mhm.
And if we're taking on the energy of other people, because there's actually a subset, up to 10% of the population is actually measurably able to take on the emotional states of other people by reading brain scans. We can tell that they are doing this.
Wow.
So if you're one of those people, then if your spouse, let's say, is feeling a way that you don't want to feel,
Mhm.
if you're not mindful
Mhm.
and intentional about being in your own energy, you are naturally, without even trying, soaking up that energy. So it's really, really important, especially if you're sensitive, to create a little bit of this is mine, this is yours.
Mhm. Okay, so I really want to dive into this with you because I have a lot of questions around that. But I do want to say two things before we move into that. I love the idea that if we're expanding, that it's harder for people's energy to enter. Just like you said, so just reiterating that the dominant force of energy in the room is what will sustain, what will be present. And I
Mhm.
think that's a really important thing to sort of reiterate so that there's motivation behind the power that we all have to create the state that we desire to reside in.
Mhm.
When that is a higher elevation or a higher vibration, again, like you said, not a competition, but a state where people would want to be more. The elevated emotions, the way that those can reign, to me is just so important. And I think that the way that we become just the second thing, the way that we become more and more aware of that, then we actually have a little like awareness like cue that goes off in our brain that says, hey, pay attention to what's happening. There's people around you. This is
Hmm.
happening for you.
Hmm.
Get back in your energy and remind yourself that you can stay solid and you get
Hmm.
to choose your state. And so use these little tricks. So good.
Yeah. And when you first start to use them, I just want to name that if you have been solving other people's problems by having their emotions in your body and then
Mhm,
trying to solve their problems from the outside in, this is going to feel really weird. It's going to feel like, okay, I can tell what they're feeling. I
mm,
know what they're feeling, but I don't feel it. And so then we get to sort of disentangle some behavioral things. And I'm just going to say one thing, which is we're going to let people have the dignity of their own experience.
mm, 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 mm. Beautiful. Okay, so now I want to move the conversation a little bit more into that. If you are what Brenda calls like highly sensitive or an empath, and sort of that kind of a conversation, because I think that people who are more sensitive, like you said, and you said 10% of the population, right? Are,
Has the 10% of the population is known as empaths, meaning
yes.
they sense and feel emotions. Up to 30% of the population is highly sensitive.
Whoa, beautiful distinction. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about the difference between highly sensitive, empath, and how do you know if you kind of sit in those arenas? And then we'll talk about
Mhm.
more questions inside of that.
Yeah. So let's start by talking about what it's not. It
Okay.
is not a sensory processing disorder. It's not something you can be diagnosed by your doctor. It's not something you can have your child have an IEP for in school. It's nothing like that. This is something totally different. So there was a research study in 1996 that revealed that 20%, that study, 20% of the population has more neuroreceptors and neurotransmitters that allowed those people with those more brain functionings to notice facial expressions, to notice verbal cues, and to be more sensitive to sensory input as far as hearing and taste and sight and smelling. And so that kind of was the gold standard up until last year. In January of 2023, a new research study came out that said it's actually 30% of the population is highly sensitive, meaning that they have more ability to sense.
Mm,
So if you're highly sensitive, it might mean that you have a saturation point at the end of the day where the volume isn't louder, but you can't take the volume anymore.
got
So
it.
if you've ever been watching TV with your partner and you suddenly look at your partner enraged and you're like, turn down the TV. I can't take it. That might be an indicator that you're highly sensitive
Mm,
because you have a saturation point. Some people are sensitive to too much light,
mm,
and lights in their faces or lights overhead will eventually it'll do that saturation thing where at the end of the
mhm.
day you just can't handle the lights.
Yeah.
Some people it manifests in not being able to tolerate certain fabric sensations on their skin. All they can think about is the scratchy fabric, and they literally have to change because they can't tolerate anything but really soft or soothing fabrics. So all of the senses can be a part of high sensitivity. And so the high sensitivity means that you have more ability to sense. If you have the empathic thread of this, it means that you are also taking on the emotions because you're more emotionally aware. You have an additional sense that they haven't quite named yet, but they're saying it seems to be another sense
Mhm,
where people can read emotions
mhm,
and sense emotions like the same way you taste lemon. People
mhm.
can sense emotions. So that's about 10% of the population, which both 30% and 10% is kind of mind blowing considering how much of the population goes around pretending like they're just fine. Right?
So true. It's so true. As you're speaking, I have question after question flashing in my mind, and I love it. And I think I have someone who's very, very close to me that is an empath that doesn't know that they are, which
Mm.
we're
Hmm.
discovering and we're finding out and seeing how this knowledge can truly benefit. So if you are an empath, do you actually feel like the level? Do you remember the book Secret Life of Bees? Did you read or watch that movie?
I did one or the other, or maybe both, but
Okay,
yes.
so there's a girl in that movie, and I hope I get the name right. Her name's May, I think, and she's one of the sisters that lives in this house. It's been years, but she feels other people's pain on a level that is like too much, and she's
Hmm.
also um well, I don't know how to, I don't really remember exactly, but I think she has some other things that are happening in her life that cause her to not be um, completely socially like capable. I'm not
Hmm.
really remembering all the way, but her sisters built her a rock wall in the back, and she goes back there and just will write the things down and put them in the wall. And she kind of calls it, I think,
Hmm.
her like wailing wall. And she goes
Hmm.
through this process to like let go of the pains and the things that other people feel. So I guess what I'm trying to like really get to is asking what level of feeling are you really feeling? Because there's compassion and empathy,
Yeah.
your ability to sit with someone. I think that that can just be a gift. I think an empath feels more, right?
Right.
And
So
so
we
how do you really know?
hopefully we all have empathy.
Mhm.
So like if you've ever been watching a movie and you feel that little firing nerve in your throat that gives you the lump and you feel the tears spring behind your eyes, that is the firing of the vagus nerve that's creating empathy. That's natural. Most of us have that. Not all of us, but most of us have that. What we're talking about when someone is an empath is that they're actually feeling in their body the emotions or the physical sensations of another person. So let me give you an example. I'm an empath. I'm a very strong empath. I have it on the emotional level, on the physical level, on the psychic level, where if I go into a crowded space and there's somebody with a migraine, I will feel that migraine in my own head.
Wow.
Now, it took me decades to be able to create enough space in my system that I could go into public because it was really tough. If
Yeah.
you don't know what somebody's going to be feeling, you walk into a mall and suddenly feel nauseous. Is it
Yeah.
yours? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we say that somebody's an empath, it could be a range
Okay.
of picking up on emotions, picking up on physical sensations.
Mhm.
And so there's a whole ability. And then
Mhm.
we're also kind of crossing over into something called intuitive or intuition. And there are 26 paths of intuition. So this is a whole other conversation. So we'll say just with empaths for right now.
Okay. But really
So
quickly, just kind of give us like, what is that? What is that intuitive 26 paths? What is that?
we all have intuition.
Right.
All of us do. We
Yeah.
talk a lot about the five clairs, like clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairaudient, and so on and so forth. What we don't often talk about is how we might have a sense of knowing that something's going to happen,
Okay.
or we dream about something that's going to happen, or we see it in our mind's eye. So all of those are different paths of intuition. The intuition can come to us, and we all have at least one or two or three intuitive abilities, and some people have lots more.
I understand a little more clearly now. Okay, that's great. That's a
Yeah.
good, like, just teaser for like maybe a future episode.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so staying with the empath, you
yeah.
mentioned that going out into public would be kind of hard, and I thought about how empaths, if they don't learn that they're empaths and
Hmm.
they don't know, then it's possible for them to just become um, at a point, like you said, like where they just avoid people
Totally,
completely.
totally.
They become like,
Yeah.
mhm, like,
Or, you probably have some awareness
mhm,
that when you're around some people, you feel good. And when you're around other people, you don't feel good. You probably have that awareness.
mm,
But if you've never been told or taught that you have these abilities, which we can measure in the brain, it doesn't make you weird or a freak. We can actually measure your brain to know that you have receptors for this information, then you may not realize that the reason you always have a headache around Uncle Sal is Uncle Sal has some kind of something going on with his brain.
mm,
And so for some people who are empaths who don't know it, they know that they feel a particular way in a particular place around particular people.
mhm.
And so if that happens for you, you probably have empathic abilities.
And then being able to take apart the layers to be able to figure out how to turn it into something that is a gift versus
Mhm.
something that weighs you down.
Right. And I think the starting place for that would be to question everything. And there's just one question, which is this mine?
Mm, beautiful. Okay, just silence for a moment. So good. So good. Okay. So I have this question about empaths possibly feeling very lonely in their life
Mm-hmm.
because they understand people so completely,
Mm-hmm.
but rarely feel understood. Is
Oh,
that real?
100%.
Is that
Oh, yes,
that's 100%?
absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're the only one in your circle who knows what everybody's feeling,
Mm.
and you're the only one in your circle who knows what can make somebody feel better, it leaves you wondering, why am I the only one who's doing this for people? Why am I feeling sad and no one's there for me? It's heartbreakingly lonely. And so if that's you, know that there are people out there like you. And the work is to find them and find community with them so you can stop feeling so alone. And you can stop feeling like maybe you're even wondering, am I lovable? Is there something wrong with me that nobody's coming to me? No, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You have an ability and a gift that's not being reciprocated because the people that you love don't have that gift.
If those words, Brenda, could be like through a megaphone in
Mm,
every high school, in every, because I also wonder, like, are we going to see the percentages of these numbers going up? Are we having more in our younger generation who are empaths and who
mm,
are going through this and they don't know, and so they're holding so much inside of them and they feel very lonely. They feel very, right? Like to me, when you were saying that, I just obviously very emotional because sometimes I think they just feel like, well, maybe, I mean, I've had this conversation. Maybe you're just more of a mature spirit. You got to give other people
mm,
space and understand that you have more capability in these areas to know people,
mm.
you
Well,
know?
and you're right. And then also, when we're talking about forming reciprocal relationships, if you're the only one, you got to find a community
Hmm.
that is also filled with empaths so that you can have your needs met. So you don't have to explain every single thing you're feeling and somebody just gets you.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
all deserve that.
So how do you find that?
I have one. I have a community of empaths and intuitives and um I found one that I belong to too, and it's just a matter of being willing to say, "Hey, I think maybe I'm different than
Mhm.
some other people. I'm going to find some people who are the same kind of different as me,
Mhm.
that have the same values that I have, where they value humanity and they value kindness and they value inclusivity and all the things, and also are empaths or intuitives and sensitive souls."
Mhm. Yeah. So good. Okay, so I think and feel that empaths probably because they're so used to holding on to things for their whole life,
Hmm.
that it's probably very viable that they, after an accumulation of years
Hmm.
and not knowing that this is happening for them, that
Hmm.
they maybe become stressed, anxious, depressed, and just really have a lot of pressure
Hmm.
because they don't know how to not absorb it as their own.
Well, yeah, you're speaking about something real.
Mhm.
And if we go back into, 400 or 500, 600 years ago, there were people that their sole job, literally their job, was to absorb the negative emotions from the royalty.
Wow.
So when we talk about, like, if you've read the Harry Potter series, love it or hate it, they have these things called Death Eaters, which absorb things, and they absorb all the emotions. And in that case, they were like they were evil kinds of spirits. That's not what I'm talking about, but I am talking about the absorbing things. So, they talked about like there would be these witches that would be part of all of the royal kingdoms. And they would talk about them with, their warts on their face and their old looking skin with the wrinkles and the white hair and the cackle. It was because they absorbed all of the negative emotions from the royalty. That was literally their job.
Wow.
And so it aged them
Oh, wow.
prematurely. And
Mhm.
there's tons and tons of historical accounts that there were different kinds of gifted individuals, empaths largely,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
had this specific role. So throughout history, we've had these kinds of people.
Mhm.
And they went underground because why wouldn't you? I mean, if you knew
Yeah.
that you were going to be subjected to all of the negativity of an entire kingdom, I'd go
Mhm.
underground too.
Yeah. 100%. That's so interesting. I'm kind of in a state where I would love to talk a little bit more about the direction that you have for them to let it go, to like release what they've been holding.
Hmm.
And then I know that it becomes a ritualistic thing
Hmm.
because even as much as you become into like even as aware as we become at how much we're absorbing of other people, right? And we're doing this thing that we're like, is it mine? And 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 I think there's also something that you could speak to that helps people understand that just by saying it's mine doesn't mean that you can't empathetically sit in a space with someone else.
Right.
It doesn't, you're not
Hmm.
building a wall that says, I
No,
can't be the person that I'm meant to be. In fact, I can be more powerful if I can learn how to keep and hold my own. But because I have this incredible gift, I get to sit with you in spaces that a lot of people can't.
exactly. Exactly. When you stop taking on other people's stuff, it doesn't make you less compassionate. It makes you more compassionate. Because when you're wearing other people's stuff like your own clothing,
Mm,
you have less capacity.
mm.
So you actually increase your capacity by not taking on other people's stuff. So, to your question about releasing it, I don't want to set the expectation that you can do one thing one time and it's
Yes.
gone.
Yeah.
That would not be that would not be true. And I don't want to mislead anybody. Depending on the length of time you've been doing it,
Mhm.
and depending on like how much you've been doing it, it might take a few things. It might take
Mhm.
time, but
Yes.
you can begin to release it with somatic practices like breath work or somatic coaching or movement or shaking, like literally
Yeah.
moving your body, like
Mhm.
shaking it out, jumping it up and down.
Mhm.
Everything is energy. So, like, if you've ever jumped up and down and shaked your hands and like you really just get to it and then you stop and you just be really still, you can feel the energy in your body. So even just a somatic practice that you would do on your own in your own bedroom, jumping up and down and shaking your hands and wiggling your head and maybe even letting some sound out of your voice, that's going to do some things to start releasing that.
I love the
But
studies. I love the studies about animals that do that and how you can see polar bears, like
mhm,
shake and they get up and their heart rate's normal after they've, been able to shake it out.
100%.
Or like a duck, whenever they fight and then they leave each other, they do this weird thing with their wings. They get all crazy for a minute and then they're just back
Mhm.
to being a duck.
Yeah. And so there's a researcher called Peter Levine. And Peter Levine is a trauma researcher, and he talks a lot about the trembling that happens in the animal kingdom that allows the animals to release a trauma from their body as soon as it happens. And humans can learn a lot from that. We're not wired typically that way, but yes, that shaking can absolutely release some things.
Right.
Breathwork practices can do it. And then I
Yeah.
also just want to name, depending on how much you've absorbed, you may need to be held as you release
Mhm.
because you want that stuff to go somewhere. Um, I always think, when I'm working with a client and I'm pulling energy and I'm putting it somewhere, I'm really intentional about where I put it. I'm not going to throw it on my dog. Like if my dog is next to me, I'm going to put it somewhere different that my dog is not because I don't want my dog to be with that negative energy. And so the other thing that I would invite you to do is to be intentional around where you're releasing it so that you're not like walking in the same energy and picking it up. So some energy practices that you could instill, like if you're going to shake it off or do breath work, you might want to light some sage and just, gently cleanse the area after you release that energy so that you can transmute it into just pure light.
Well said. Okay, so lighting sage. Great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was the first thing you said? You said something and then shaking. Did you say breath work and then shaking?
Yeah, somatic practices, any somatic practices,
Mm-hmm.
sounding, breath work,
Mm-hmm.
shaking,
Mm-hmm.
lots of those things.
Sounding and all of that is so fascinating to me right now.
Hmm.
We have a
Hmm.
podcast coming up on that. So, yes, I just think that there's, like you said, not to get stuck on it. There's one way. I always talk to my clients about how we have to have a process to process. And there can be many processes to process. It's just letting it go, figuring it out. And I just love the example about the animals because it's the most clear. But if you've never been in I, I feel like I tend to have like a lot of emotional release, like in a breathwork session,
Hmm.
especially the breathwork sessions that I've done that have been live. Do you see that live or maybe they're just private? The ones that I've done, I have like more, and maybe it's because I am picking up on energy of other people in those sessions as well.
Well, I think that it depends. I do a lot of breath work. I
Mhm,
hold a lot of breath work and I do a lot of breath work.
mhm.
And, I have found that I can get just as big of a release on a recorded breath work if it's well done.
Yeah.
I think the thing is you want to, and then the other piece is I'm thinking faster than my mouth. So there's two pieces. If you're really going in for transformation, you want a breathwork session that's guiding you towards transformation. If you're in a breathwork session that is guiding you toward relaxation, that's not the same thing.
Mm,
And so I think that there's some intentionality that's
mm,
also at play with different breathwork sessions. But yeah, there's no substitute for live breathwork. I'm a big fan. If
okay.
you can get into a live breathwork session,
Do
do
it.
it, because
100%.
then you can be held by the facilitator
Mhm.
and they're watching you for cues that you are at the window of tolerance for your nervous system.
Right.
So they can really safely guide you.
Mhm. And I just want to point this out because it's a metaphor that you have said before that really can stick with you. And I think that when you understand that letting these things go or having a process to process, it is like a ritualistic behavior, like brushing your teeth. It's not something
Hmm.
that you do or you do a lot of and you get to a point where you don't have to do it anymore.
Right.
It's a consistent thing, and especially if you're highly sensitive or an empath, I would imagine that it holds even more importance to make sure that you're doing it as a ritual.
Absolutely. So you wouldn't brush your teeth once and then call it done.
Hmm.
These practices are the same.
Yeah.
You want to insert them in your day somehow.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not in an hour-long breathwork session every day. But I'm in an hour-long breathwork session 2 or 3 times a week. And then I might have a 15-minute breathwork session throughout, on different days.
Hmm.
Or maybe one day I decide I want to only do meditation and not do breathwork. So I'm trying not to get rigid with what I'm doing,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing something
Hmm.
every single day.
Hmm. Even like you said, the movement and yoga and the things to where you're allowing that to happen in your body. It's incredible.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I started taking ballroom dancing lessons, salsa, bachata, and nightclub two step.
Yeah, I saw.
And it is so fun. And it's really interesting to feel because I'm a somatic coach
Yeah.
too. So I'm cued into what's happening in the body. It's really interesting to feel my body releasing energy through something that's not what it's for. Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to my dance lesson to release something. I'm going to my dance lesson to dance,
Yeah.
but I am releasing something.
Yeah.
And so, if yoga is not your thing,
Hmm.
maybe dancing is, or maybe it's running,
Hmm.
or maybe it's golf, or
Hmm.
whatever it is. If you keep having that urge to go move your body in that way, I think there's a lot of wisdom there.
So, and would you say that just constantly having a mix is very good because, movement plus these other types of, breath work and meditation, to me, I feel like that's such a key element. But am I off in thinking that? Or is that like, you know what I'm saying? Like, can somebody just say, well, I'll just do, and again, maybe it's just where people are at. I'm just wondering, like, what's your take on?
My gold standard is that
Mhm.
there's meditation or breath work every single day.
Yeah. Me too.
And then everything else is bonus on top. But
Yeah.
I do not let one day pass without meditation. And I'm on year 24.
Yeah. Amen, girl.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's
I
it's
agree.
just it's this foundation of everything good in my
Yeah.
life.
To me, it's a setting the bar for your vibration so that your
Mhm.
energy is expanding and you're consistently checking into that higher vibration. It's just going to elevate you. I love it.
Absolutely. And if you don't do it, then you get to be kind of, it's like you're in the stream and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get knocked around whichever way the current
Mm,
floats you.
mm.
And so you can get into the stream of your desires, of your expansion, of your joy, or you can get in the stream of what society is telling you.
Beautifully, beautifully said. So good. Okay, so I want to ask you something about your salsa dancing. When you go to salsa dancing, I would imagine there's a lot of really great energy in the room. And I know that you're walking in and you can feel it, like on a level that a lot of people can't. Do you use it? And is it okay to use other people's energy in that way? And does it light you up? And is that fun and exciting?
Okay, so there's a few questions here. One is I go to private lessons. So I'm dancing on the floor with my teacher, and then sometimes there's other students dancing on the floor with their teachers, but it's not a party. It's not a dance party. The event that I went to is a big showcase, and I don't know how many dancers there were. I know the night that I danced, there were like 175 heats. So it was a lot. So the first thing that I want to speak to is it okay to use the energy of the room? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you put yourself in a place that's high vibration as long as you're not being an energy vampire? Meaning, if I was trying to draft off of my teacher, off of one individual, trying to soak up their positive energy, not being responsible for my own, that's not okay.
Okay.
But if
Now, does
I'm
it
going,
take away from the teacher when you do that?
if I was to try to draft
Draft?
his
Yeah.
energy,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not good.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it's
So
not
cool.
good. So
Okay.
I am not an energy vampire. I have met energy vampires. And I just like, I have my fingers up in the cross, like, no, thank you. I will not
Mm,
spend time with you again if you try to suck my energy. I
mm,
feel like sometimes energy vampires don't know that they're energy vampires. They
mm.
just know they feel really good around certain people. And sometimes they do know. And they're like, oh, I'm going to go draft on some of her energy. And if you've ever said that, seriously, stop doing it because the people that you're drafting energy from are going to get tired of it and they're going to cut off your supply because
Mm,
I don't produce extra positive energy for people to take it. I'm willing to share it.
mm.
Like, if I was thinking of blowing bubbles, right? If I'm blowing bubbles and you want to blow bubbles and our bubbles touch and they like float through the world together, that's beautiful. But if you grab the bubble wand out of my hand
Mm.
and try to take my bubbles, that's something really different,
Okay.
right?
I like it. Do we just know and feel the difference? Like, or is there any more that we can, like the how to of not absorbing and doing
It
it in the proper ways?
it comes back to personal responsibility.
Great.
Are you showing up with having done your work? Are
Mm-hmm.
you tending to your own alignment, to your own vibration first? And if you are, then enjoy the energy around you. If you are not, you are sucking someone else's energy. Like if you come in and you're down in the dumps and you're depressed and you've done nothing for yourself, you haven't meditated, you haven't gone for a walk, you haven't moved, you're not hydrated, you haven't eaten well, and then you go to somebody and then you start to feel better, you're being an energy vampire.
Oh, this is so eloquent. And I think that extends to also beyond empaths. I think that's kind of like a universal standard. So I think
Yeah.
that that's just a really beautifully like thing to be able to say that because I think we do get into places where we rely so much on other people and I have had someone in my life do that and it is draining, draining,
Hmm.
draining, draining.
So
And
listen
for
to your word choice, draining.
mm, mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
totally. I
yeah.
love that.
Okay, so here I want to shift a little bit into the way that we can turn because Brenda, I see you show up as an empath. I have watched you in breathwork sessions, hold place for even my clients, people that I work with, and other breathwork sessions that we've been in with people, or with my own self. And I know that you have an ability to feel the things that other people are feeling, and it has really assisted you and become
Mhm.
a great gift for you. And so I kind of want to see what you have to say in speaking to the ways that we allow it to become a gift versus something that is like really hurting us. Because if we stay in that realm, what we become is reclusive
Mhm.
and highly taxed by the world. We don't have anything to give back because we have absorbed everybody else's, and we're
Mhm.
too busy trying to process all of this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so there's a completely different shift in coming into a space where you use it as a gift.
Yeah. So when I was little, I mean, I've always had the gifts that I have now. They weren't developed,
Mhm.
but I've always had them. I knew as a young child that it freaked people out, that I had something that they did not.
Mm,
And I didn't necessarily know that with my friends so much because all of all kids appear just a little different when you're a kid. You're like, oh, that person does this and this person does that. And everyone's just a special kind of weird, right? But I could tell that I was freaking out my teachers
mhm.
because I would know things about them or their lives or their family that they hadn't shared. But I didn't have the awareness to know that that's not cool for me to, number one, to say it in a public space. And number two, that it freaked people out. So what I did was I kept my abilities, but I turned it into people pleasing. So instead of responding to people, I would try to please them first. So I became like the world champion people pleaser. And that's how it manifested for me. So I people pleased all the way through high school, even into college. People pleased through my first marriage. See what I did there? I'm not married again yet, but someday maybe. And so, it got me really in a lot of trouble. And when I got out of that marriage in 2007, I was like, okay, what can I do that would be healing for me? And I didn't know. So I just like had this openness, like, okay, what's it going to be? So my sister bought me a yoga package. And so I started going to yoga and I was like, okay, this feels pretty good. I can start to see what's my body. And I was so disembodied. I didn't even know what that felt like. And then when I became a Reiki master in 2016, everything started to kind of unlock because then I gained some skill in turning it on, turning it off, meaning I can walk into a space and not have my empathic abilities online so that I can be in a more public space and not know everybody's backstory. And so it took practice, it took skill, like actually
It's
learning the
like it's like
skill.
the first question in my mind right now is how? How did you do it?
Well, a little bit of like zipping up, like what I've taught you, coming into my central channel, and then also just knowing that actually it comes back to this, it's setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I had to set boundaries with myself, with people are going to think I'm a special kind of something here, but
You are.
I had I had to set boundaries with people that were coming to see me from the other side because it was like this constant stream of people. It was overwhelming. It was all the time. I wasn't sleeping. It was like all the time. So I had to set boundaries with everything around
Wow.
when I'm going to be open, when I'm not going to be open, what's
Mm,
okay in my home, what's
mm,
not okay in my home. And that boundary setting led me to what I do now, which is I help other people set boundaries so that they can be in rich relationship with people.
mm.
So that, sometimes we think, I got to set a boundary. In other words, I'm going to push someone away.
Yeah.
But the way I perceive boundaries is that it's a way we can be in close relationship with
Mm,
someone when we sort of create that how-to manual
mm,
for ourselves.
mm.
So a lot of it comes back down to boundaries too.
I like the way that you said that because it allows us not to just push people far away when they have
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we're saying about them that we can't handle.
Mm-hmm.
We can still be in the relationship, but we can set a boundary around that one thing that doesn't work for us.
Right.
And we can still fully love this person and recognize I have one or two or many things that they might see,
Mm-hmm.
and let me just set a boundary around that. That's a great piece of advice. Yeah.
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 And so when we set boundaries, sometimes we say them. We need to say them out loud to the other person. And sometimes they're internal.
Mm-hmm.
And those internal boundaries are actually harder to keep.
Mm. But the more that you keep them, the easier it would get, I assume.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like think about anytime you're trying to start a new habit, that is an internal boundary.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's so good. So, um, and then I think that you probably just got to a point where you were then being able to, when you could turn it on and you're holding
Mhm.
space for other people in the work that you do. I would imagine that empaths probably do. I mean, I don't know, but I would think that empaths like naturally do some kind of a work where they, if they've become well educated on, and I think that I am thinking of three people right now after we've talked that I'm like in my distant family and some people that are close to me that I know that I'm like, and some of them are quite old, and I'm like, oh my word, they probably never knew these beautiful truths, these beautiful things that you've been, privileged to discover to then be able to help walk people through. It's incredible. And then to be able to say, okay, I'm turning it on right now so
Mhm.
that, I mean, Brenda, there was a moment in this conversation when you were speaking and it spoke so much to my soul. And I visibly was crying and you could see that. But I know
Mhm.
that you are in this space holding it with me right now today. And I
Mhm.
know that you could feel that. And there's this element that you get to use. And I just want to point this out because if you are listening to this and this is something that you are like, yes, 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 that's me. This is an incredible gift that you have been given to be able to help humanity,
Mhm.
not in a way that allows you to become this witch that is like the cackle and all of this stuff, like we talked about,
Mhm.
because there's also a way to let that go. So, in
Right.
other words, you become this channel that helps other people to just let it, and you know how to let it go. There's just so much richness in fully and completely understanding this as a gift.
Mhm. And learning skills to protect your gift,
Mhm.
setting the boundaries, getting grounded.
Yeah.
And then, like the self-care practices that I just glossed over, like hydration, nutrition, and movement, they're non-negotiable.
Mm.
Because if you're not fully resourced and you're trying to be empathic to somebody, it's almost impossible not to do the merge. And when I say merge, that would be if you begin to have an emotional moment and I merge with you, then I'm having the same emotional moment in my body.
Mm.
So I can be aware of, sense, know, witness your emotions. I feel them in my body, but I'm not affected by it. I'm not wearing it.
Mhm.
And so the difference is I can think more clearly for myself. Because if I'm wearing somebody else's emotions, it's really hard for me to make grounded decisions that are of the highest integrity to me.
Wow, I really really love this conversation. I think it's so helpful, not just for me, but I think a lot of people who are listening to this conversation. I think with the percentages being so high with people who are highly sensitive or empaths, I think if you're listening to this, either you fall into one of those categories or you are supporting other people that are in those
Mhm.
categories. And so
Mhm.
what I would ask, um, Brenda, for you to give us a little bit more guidance or whatever comes to mind is, what do we do if we know that we're hearing this, and when we're hearing this, we're thinking about someone in our lives that is in this arena? Aside from sharing this episode and being like, "Oh my word, you need to listen to this," to try to help you discern, whether this
Mhm.
is the way that things are for you or not. What more can you say that we can do for our loved ones when we feel that they might be in the arena of being highly sensitive or empaths?
So I think, sharing this episode would be a great thing to do. I also have a couple podcast episodes. I can share the links with you. Like, am I highly sensitive?
Right.
And some markers that you might be, some different behavior things that you might notice of yourself, or different ways that you feel about things. And my guess is, if you're wondering if you're an empath, you are. Like, I mean, this is not something that people who aren't empaths go around even thinking about, because they know they're not an empath.
Yeah.
So if you're like, I wonder if that's me. Yeah, you are. I
Yeah.
also have a resource on my website. It's called Breathwork to Strengthen and Trust Intuition. It's a free breathwork course. And that might also be an interesting thing for people to dive into, because I talk about how you know when something is intuition, and the sense of safety you need to create in your body and in your room to allow that intuition to come through. And then there's a guided breathwork session on there too. So
Ah,
that's on the website at brendawinkle.com/breathe.
so helpful. Okay, so pointing them to the right direction is
Hmm.
what you would say.
I would. And then, you know your loved one.
Hmm.
And so if you come up to your loved one and you say, "Hey, I think you're an empath," you know already how they're going to take that.
Yeah.
If you know that that's going to be, they're going to get their hackles raised and they're going to get defensive and they're going to say, "No, I'm not. I don't know what that is. That's weird." Maybe don't do that.
Yeah.
If you think that it would make them feel more seen
Hmm.
and more heard,
Hmm.
then yeah, by all means do that. But
Hmm.
if there's any question in your mind around your loved one's openness
Hmm.
to hearing this information, just keep sharing things like this with them.
Beautiful. And and I would imagine that there are some questions that we can try to hold better space for them just by saying like, how do you feel? I don't know. Would an empath appreciate that? Like
Well,
like to be known more, like to be held in a better space.
I think a more supportive question would be, what can I do to support you? How would you feel
Mm-hmm.
supported?
Hmm.
Because if you ask an empath how I feel, it's going to put their brain in search mode. And they're going to be like, "What do you mean? How do I feel? Am I feeling what you feel? What do you want me to feel?" And so it's going to like
Wow.
create this whole search engine thing in their system. And they may or may not be able to give you an answer.
Yeah.
But if you ask, "How can I support you? What do you
Yeah.
need? Do you
Yeah.
need someone to hold space for you? Do
Yeah.
you need a nap? Like, how can I support you?" I think that would be really supportive.
Wow. I love that. I love that. What would be a good question for us to know them better? To know them, not to know what they're carrying of everybody else's.
Hmm. Well, I think, there's as many different kinds of empaths as there are people.
Hmm.
And so, asking questions like, if they're being very empathic towards you and you know that they are, ask them, "Can you tell me what's going on in your life? Like, I just want to sit and listen. What's happening for you? What's alive for you in this moment?" Because so often empaths don't have any space held for them. They're the ones that are listening in every phone conversation to their loved ones. They're the ones that are holding space at the dining room table. So giving them space just to say, "Hey, what's going on for you today? What's alive?" And just listen would mean a lot.
Wow. I love it. Brenda, you have poured into us today. Are
Hmm.
there any last thoughts that you have as we wrap up that you want to share with our audience?
Well, I just want to say, I love your heart. Like, you are so generous and so loving and so kind, and your community is so blessed to have you. Thank you for being willing to do the work that you're doing for them.
Wow. Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Brenda. Wow. You guys, Brenda is an absolute resource for you. I'll put the links that she talked about in the show notes. Make sure that you check those out. Find her on Instagram at Brenda Winkle, right?
Yeah, that's right.
At Brenda Winkle. And there she just is, she's up to so many good things. So find
Thank
her,
you,
follow
Misha.
her, read her emails. They're so good. They're so good. You just
Oh,
can't go wrong being in that space. She does
Thank
breath
you.
work, she does somatic healing, so many wonderful, great contributions to help us walk this path, and obviously is a wealth of knowledge. So, yeah,
Mm.
wow. Thanks for pouring into us today, Brenda.
You're so welcome. And it'll be really fun. Tag us, tag Misha and I,
Mm,
and tell us what you loved. Tell us what questions you have, and we'll
mhm.
respond and we'll put you in our stories.
Yeah, 100%. I love that idea. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Brenda.
Thank you for having me, Misha.
All right. See you.
Bye.
Oh, my friend, I hope you got something crazy useful out of that episode. I was constantly like, yes, yes, yes. Like, people need to hear and see and know this so badly, because what breaks my heart the most is that people could have this incredible gift, and because they don't know it, it turns into something negative in their life. So, if you know of someone who might be an empath, or might be parenting an empath, or might be married to an empath, anything around empaths, highly sensitive people, and quite frankly, it's so valuable for all of us just to hear, so that we can really realize how much power we have in maintaining our own energy and our own state, and that we don't have to allow that to be merging with the energies around us. It's wildly helpful. But if you know someone, share the episode. Share the episode with them so that we can help them as well. And don't forget that I'll put all of the links mentioned in the podcast in the show notes. So everything from the Heart Sync course at the very beginning to Brenda, where to find her, all of her links that she mentioned in the podcast that will be so vital and helpful for you. I'll put them all in the show notes. And if you've never accessed the show notes before, it's really easy. You just look below the episode and you'll find where it says episode notes, and you can click on the little button that says show, and then it will give you all of the show notes with all of the links and the goodness. All right, and make sure that you tune in next week. I'm going to give you a couple of things that I say to myself when I'm in a situation where the energy of another person challenges my own. Until next time.